patriotism, faith, national unity, education, fiscal responsibility, civility, the values that define America. Fascinating stories and talks from America-loving patriots dedicated to preserving freedom, opportunity, and justice. Welcome to the Friends and Fellow Citizens podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Friends and Fellow Citizens. I'm your host, Sherman Tylowski, as usual, and thank you so much for tuning in today. We've got a very special guest coming onto this show. Before we get started, I do have a couple announcements. First is that the submission period, you could say, for the Q&A that's coming up in May 2021 is now open. The Q&As will be the question submissions will be open until April 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern. So make sure, if you have a question, make sure you submit that on time, and that way I'll be able to get through as many questions as I can for that upcoming Q&A episode. I'm very excited about that. We've already gotten some really good questions, and I can't wait to look for more as we go along through the end of April 2021. The second is that if you haven't checked out my appearance on the What the Politics podcast, it's an appearance that I did about a couple weeks ago. It's a great show. I'm trying to, once again, trying to get people on with different perspectives to come together to share different points of view. Be sure to check out that appearance on the press tab if you go onto my website, shermantylowski.com, and we'll be sure to link my website in the show notes description below. I'll make sure to include that in future episodes. And now I'd like to introduce our guest for this episode, Will Reusch. Will has spent the last 15 years as a high school government, civics, and American history teacher in Los Angeles. He's been teaching in various different schools. He's also the co-moderator of the Heterodox Academy K-12 education community. He's also a member of Civic Spirit, and he's also the host of his own podcast called Cylinder Radio, a really great show, and I'll be sure to include some links that Will has provided for us so that you can check out his content. He's got a lot of really great episodes out there, and I'm just so happy to be able to connect with another podcaster, but someone who I think has done a lot to expand the area of proper education towards our kids. I think there's a lot of discussion, a lot of conversations about education policy, but also even deeper down, how we're teaching our kids, what our kids are learning in schools. Certainly in this day and age, it's become very challenging with the pandemic and with so many schools closed for a long period of time. Online learning has been a huge challenge, but let's focus now today on some of those root causes of some of these issues that we're seeing right now with regards to being able to ensure we're educating our kids properly. And now I'd like to welcome Will onto Friends of Fellow Citizens. Will, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me here, Sherman. This is a really important topic, so yeah, let's get into it.
Absolutely. Well, let's start off with a bit about your background first, before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of today's topic. So give us a bit more details about your background and how you came about to being in the education realm.
Yeah, I graduated college. I went to Penn State, graduated in 2005, and then right away moved out to California and have been teaching full-time ever since. So first graduating class was 2007, I think, was the first graduating class that I started teaching. I've been at 3 different high schools in the LA area, very diverse schools. I was at schools that were 0% white, very poor, gang-infested, really sad situations. And then now I'm at like a wealthy, religious private school. And it's very different, but it's still all Los Angeles. And I've been teaching government, economics, and for all 15 years, and then or whatever it is, and then now I've been teaching civics for a class that I wrote for the last 2 years.
Fantastic. Now, tell me a little bit about kind of maybe some of the learning experiences that you've had as a teacher. I mean, I think in education, it's certainly, our focus is obviously to teach kids, but are there any lessons that you have learned throughout your teaching career that you think are most important to yourself?
Oh yeah, I mean, a ton. A lot of it is just kind of intellectual humility, though. Like, I don't have all the answers. The idea of like the sage on the stage is it's not it's that doesn't work out. There's a lot. I have a certain um, skill base and knowledge level just because I'm older and things like that, and I'm interested in these topics and I read a lot and watch a lot and have a lot of conversations and stuff. But I still can learn a ton about people and communities and things like that from my students. So a lot of times when we're trying to look for ways through this, ways to improve America, essentially, uh, you know, it's more of like a think tank. It's more of like me being the guide and then having my students be like my minions to like, here's the problem, here's what I think some solutions are. Go poke holes in my solutions and make it better. Okay, go run. Here's all the tools that I can kind of give you to do that. It's kind of like I run the first leg with the baton. I've gotten here with 38 years and 15 years of teaching. Here's the baton. Go run with it.
That reminds me of a quote I heard from somewhere. I can't remember who it's from, but it says something along the lines of how everyone is a teacher in some way. The nicest person in the world and the meanest person in the world can give you something of value, something that you can take as part of your learning throughout life. And I think you're probably a great example of someone who understands that learning is very much self-driven and that you have to be self-motivated to pursue something that's beyond your state of comfort. It's outside your comfort zone, right? I want to now move to one of our central topics today, which is about civil discourse. When you look at the state of discourse, it feels like it's in disarray. I mean, you're seeing people with their YouTube comment battles going on. Then you've got people basically going out on the streets and fighting one another over political differences. But then it really comes down now to a bit about the education aspect, though. I just picked out a couple stats here to start off this question. I kind of want to get your opinion on this. So I found, this is according to the Woodrow Wilson National Fellowship Foundation, they found in 2019 that a majority of Americans in every state except Vermont, I don't know why, maybe it's the maple syrup there, who knows, but would fail a test based on the questions in the U.S. citizenship test. So 49 out of the 50 states. I'm guessing they probably, I don't know if they did D.C. and the 5 territories, but out of all the states, 49 out of 50 did not, the majority of Americans did not pass. They actually failed this. A flat-out majority, 57% of U.S. citizens failed this test, with a staggering 73% of Americans under the age of 45. I mean, this is a staggering, isn't it, Will, right? What do you think are the top kind of big issues that you think are happening as we're seeing this kind of deficit with regards to civics education?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. There's so many different angles that I could take on thinking about this because I think about it all the time. But why is it that the generally state standards, I've taught in 2 different states, but I know what it is in several states. Generally, it's you need 1 semester of government, 1 semester. And I teach a civics class, but when I tell people that, they're like, what? They still teach civics. Like, civics class is not a class in K through 12. And 1 semester of government, because then it's 1 semester of government, 1 semester of economics. It's almost nothing. So if the system is designed that way, I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat for a second, perhaps those in power do not want young people to understand the system and use the system to gain power. I don't know, but typically, you might know this better than I do being on Capitol Hill, but it's a lot of legacies. It's a lot of kids from certain backgrounds who have family members. They know the way the system runs, and then they get kind of streamlined into it. My wife is a small business owner. No surprise. Her dad was a small business owner. You know, a lot of people are teachers. Their parents were teachers. They go in the military because they're so. You know, the idea that government and government positions and internal efficacy can come from anyone, from any citizen. That's the kind of the idea here. They want to maybe shut that down. Now, again, I don't think that's the only explanation, but I don't want to ignore the fact that might be a factor. I don't know, but there's other avenues I could go down in explaining it as well.
Sure. I think you're absolutely right, because one of the things that I am very frustrated about is when people say that they want to fix our democracy or they're fighting for this, but they don't even know what they're fighting for. You know, they just kind of say these kinds of things because it sounds great, right? It's maybe a human nature aspect, because we feel like, oh, I need to feel like some kind of hero. I need to feel like I'm doing good. There's kind of a self-gratification aspect towards it. But in reality, the world of civics and politics is much more complex than just saying that you want more love in this world. That's not a piece of legislation. That's got to be work. You have to work towards something very specific. Do you think that this lack of civics education really is a big contributing factor as to why people are not being very genuine on their quote unquote calls for reform and positive change?
Yeah, I think that we have to let kids know like that there is a process to go through this. You want statues taken down, there's a process for that. You want better policing, there's a process for that. We had a walkout after the Parkland shooting a couple of years ago, and the girls that organized it at my school were very passionate about this walkout. I said, okay, that's great. You get to miss class. The school was like, oh, it's okay because it's an important topic. So you get to miss class. That was your sacrifice. You get to miss class. I was like, how about this? I will stay after school with you for as long as it takes, and we will write legislation. We'll write a bill. We'll contact our congressman, and it was Karen Bass, I believe. So we'll contact our congresswoman, and we will be a squeaky wheel. We will write her office and call her office every single day until she, gives us an answer about this gun bill that you're proposing. And then we will try and publish, through your social media channels, what she said to that. And I was like, this is going to take a lot of hours. We need to figure out good legislation. Who's in? And the girl's just like, what? No, let's just stick to the walkout. And I think so it's that grit element. It's like the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, like they had specific things they were arguing for, specific zoning laws or whatever it is. Like there's real things. Ross Perot had that quote that's really great. It's the activist isn't the one that says the river is dirty, it's the one who cleans up the river. And it's a lot easier to stand there with a sign that says don't litter than it is to go out with that stick with a spike in it and clean it up. And we need to push the youth to actually go clean it up. And I think that's at the core of what's going on here.
And you're absolutely right. And you bring up a really good point about giving people those options. And if people don't want to take a particular option, don't want to do the hard work, and that's their choice. But they shouldn't be expecting a guarantee of success when they're not doing their homework, when they're not even trying to do something that's a bit more challenging. There's a saying that goes to saying, oftentimes we're at a point where we have to choose between doing what is easy and doing what is right. Now, those aren't the only two options all the time, but it's true in a lot of ways. It does take that gut. It does take that confidence and that knowledge of how to get somewhere. And there's no doubt there's going to be roadblocks. In any system, there's going to be roadblocks, but it's all about having that courage and being able to understand those roadblocks so that you can go through and you can put together maybe a coalition of people who can help you achieve successes that are bigger than any one individual.
Yeah. And, I think, Tulsi Gabbard, who, was a congresswoman for whatever, 8 or 10 years or something like that. She has been very open about the partisan fighting and all that kind of stuff, about the way it really works. And so that's been kind of eye-opening. But I think I agree with what you said, that we choose what's easy, but I think even more than that, it just add another wrinkle. I think we avoid things that are scary. And I think that we look at, courage versus cowardice. So the way I kind of think about it is courage is there's something that to be right, And between you and the action that you know to be the right thing to do is something scary. So it's that concept of like dragons hoard gold. So like the gold is what you want, that's the treasure. The dragon is between you. So you have to face the dragon to get at the gold. You have to face what's scary, what's fear inducing to get to what's right. And when you do that, that's courage. The one who faces their fears to do what is right, but the one who turns away and doesn't do what's right out of fear is cowardice. And the bar has just gotten so low, and people are just becoming more and more cowards. It's not like I'm going to hide someone in my attic in 1930s Germany, and if they find out they're going to kill my family. It's not. It's I don't want to get called a bad name on social media. There people are just so fearful that they're not doing what's right. And I think that that's an element. So it could be fearful of the work. It could be fearful of being called a bad name. It could be a lot of those things, but there's just not enough courage to push back. And I think that that's an element. And teachers don't have it either, because you look at what's happening in the education system. There's a lot of bad ideas going through, and teachers are scared to chime in on that. So I think that we need to instill courage in kids to do what they know to be right. And morality is a whole different thing. But once they've established just in their heart they know something to be right, then they need to face their fears so they can do what's right.
Absolutely. And this kind of leads me to something else that you reminded me of, and something that I've always felt that has been a bit on the decline. I don't think there's a quantitative way to measure that. And that's really on the issue of personal responsibility. Let's be honest. It's hard to admit that we're wrong, like I'm wrong or you're wrong or someone else is wrong. It's difficult because it does damage our own ego to some degree, right? We like to go around saying that we understand the world how it is, but then we have something called cognitive dissonance, which I'm sure you're familiar with, right? Which I guess to put in more layman's terms, it means a bit more of like you had your own worldview, right? And then something just comes crashing through and then kind of breaks your worldview, and you don't know how to react. You start acting, fearful. You start calling people names. You start just acting irrationally, like you're kind of a madman. What would you say about kind of the virtue of personal responsibility in American education? Have you seen that as a bit of a victim as we've discussed the state of civil discourse in American education?
Yeah, there's a lot there. One of my favorite people to read is Jocko Willink. He's a former West Coast commander for the Navy SEALs, and his first book was called Extreme Ownership. And it's basically the idea that whatever happens, his whole thing is like whatever happens, good. So like you break your arm, good, because you learn from your fall or whatever. But the extreme ownership is it's your fault. Now, so I could give a teacher example. Is a kid fails because he went to the movies instead of studying. No, it's still your fault because you didn't do your job to basically convince him that this was important or something along those lines. And you could always argue, well, no, he has free will and he chose blah, 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 blah. But how is that going to make you a better teacher? Like you go to the intersection and it has a little walking guy and you just walk and then get hit by a car that runs the red light. Yes, you can just blame it on the car that hit you forever, but how is that going to make you better? And maybe next time when the walking guy comes up, you're going to look left and look right and look left again. I mean, we have to always be thinking about getting better, and that's where the personal responsibility comes in. And yeah, I agree with you. We don't want to be wrong, and I think that one of the things that I've kind of stumbled upon is seeking disconfirmation, not confirmation bias, is I actually like being proven wrong. I just posted something recently and a family friend said, hey, you were really off base with this. I got right on the phone and called him up, FaceTime, like, what am I missing here? Because that's the juice. Like if you're a basketball player and your team is in a close fight, but you eke it out at the last second at a buzzer beater and you win, you're not going to go back to the locker room saying, hey, we gotta work on this nearly as much as if you would have missed that buzzer beater. So your failures that's the goal for getting better. And that is another thing that's not taught in schools because of the high stakes testing. You can't fail this test because it'll mean funding. It'll mean you won't get into the college that you want to get into, all of that kind of stuff. And then kids are so failure adverse that they don't take chances. And then that goes to they don't want to take chances in having a discussion. I would love to have everyone that I am critical with come on my podcast and have a conversation. I invite so many people that disagree with me and tell me terrible things to have a conversation, and they don't want to. And I think it's a real missed opportunity. I think it's a missed opportunity for me, and I think it's a missed opportunity for them. And I think I could learn from everyone that I disagree with. But yeah, I think it's a problem. I think that it's stuck in our ego. It's stuck in our tribal nature, where if I do change my mind, then what happens in my group? Because I'm in this echo chamber. If my screen name is Vegan Guy 35 and I decide that bacon's delicious, well, then who am I? Kind of thing. It really causes a lot of cognitive dissonance, as you said. And I think that's why you have to be aligned. What you say, think, and do has to be all aligned for you to try to avoid those kind of pitfalls.
I got to say that's such a wonderful quality you have, Will, to be able to say publicly that you want to be challenged. You want to have people put out a different perspective because you want to learn. That's something so much, and that's so rare nowadays, feels like. I want to go back a bit to the previous point about what you said of people trying to shield themselves from failure, try to shield themselves from any kind of confrontation. And more often than not, we're in this situation where we meet someone and this person, regardless of whichever side of the political spectrum they're on, they're saying all these bad things about something, about your perspective or your ideology. The problem is that oftentimes it's a straw man argument, that they just attack you for a view that wasn't even expressed, like something that you'd even say. And I just wonder, these people, are these people actually listening to what they're refuting? Or are they just taking an imaginary argument that no one made and attacking that because they feel that their argument is just insecure and that it may not be as good as they think it is? It's something to think about, but we just need more people like you, Will, to be able to face the opposition, face opposing views. Just recognize that sometimes, oftentimes, in fact, vast majority of times, you're facing an opponent but not an enemy. But I want to now move a little bit towards something else, if I may. As a teacher, you've clearly seen how the relationship between the parents and the child influences the child's ability to succeed in your class or succeed in other classes and other activities. Have you seen any horror stories where the kid basically is calling all the shots and there's almost figuratively no adult in the room where they grow up? Have you seen anything like that in your career, and what's that been like?
Oh yeah, I mean, I taught in schools where like the kids just had no structure at home, so they didn't have a bedtime. They might not have had much food in the house, but whatever they did, it was junk food, and they didn't know that like McDonald's was bad for you, stuff like that. So, yeah. So when it comes to discipline, when I really didn't like school. I didn't like college a whole lot. I liked the social element, but like the classes. But I had a wonderful teacher my senior year in college who was a social studies education, my professor. And really what she said, she just gave like one nugget that it was really all I needed going into my career. And she said, just when you say something, mean it. And that's it. And like that, and that she's like, if you mean what you say and say what you mean, you'll be fine. And she's like, if you say, hey, if you get out your phone again, I'm smashing it up against the wall, and they get out their phone again, you got to just go, damn it. All right, you got to smash it up against the wall. You have to. A lot of teachers think that kids will buy in if they like you. The aim is not to be liked. The aim is to be respected. Getting that respect, because kids want structure. Children want structure. All kids, even rebellious teenagers. I spent my whole adult life around teenagers. They want some sort of structure because they're trying to figure out the world. The age that I teach, through which is 9th through, I don't teach 9th grade. I teach 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. When you come in as a 9th grade, you're kind of a child. And when you leave after graduating, you're kind of an adult. So you do that transition while I got you. And in that, the reason you rebel is because you're saying, hey, like, okay, so I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. My kids don't have any freedom. They don't. I tell them when to eat, what to eat, when to go to bed, where they can go, blah, 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 blah. But they're safe, you know? And then as you become an adult, really all an adult is someone who makes up their own decisions for themselves. That's really all it is. So you're trying to figure that out. And the only way you can really figure out what is a good decision that you can make is you have to be able to make those decisions. And then when life bites you in the butt, you go, oh, okay, I made the wrong decision. A lot of times parents, that's scary for them because they don't want their kid getting bit in the butt. They don't want them falling. But you have to give them that structure so they understand that the world has consequences. And I always try to do punishments or whatever, whether it's with my own kids or my students, that are natural. There are natural consequences to this. I don't need to punish you on top of it. Like, you didn't study, you got an F. I'm not giving you a detention after that. An F is an F. You make that decision. Like, and then I think that that's really important for helping kids to understand the world, because then what we see is, like, whether it's the sixth and it's the dudes who are, you know, MAGA stan cult, you know, charging the Capitol, or it's the stuff over the summer and it's the woke cult, you know, going after things. Either way, they're kind of LARPing. You know, they're live action role playing these like things, wearing masks. It feels like a video game, and they don't understand that there's real consequences. I don't know if you saw the video of the woman who was shot on the 6th, but the guy had his gun out and she leaped through the window as if it wasn't a real gun. Like, it was like, she clearly didn't understand the consequences of the real world. And we're so advanced as a society. You know, most of us have not seen, unless you live in a really tough neighborhood, you haven't seen someone be killed in front of you. We're so removed from the harsh realities of where food comes from and all that kind of stuff that we don't understand it. And I think that goes back to what your point was of these kids need structure. They need discipline. They need that stuff. And it's cruel to not give that to them.
Absolutely. I would argue also that teenagers definitely want authority because you see it all the time. You see a lot of teenagers, especially in those small groups. At least when I went to school, I used to see these groups of friends. You can clearly tell who was the leader and how things worked. I mean, there's kind of an informal structure of things, but people just want to have some kind of structure, and they want to be able to fit in and to be able to satisfy their own liking or their own status, if you want to put it that way. Now, the other thing is that it feels like some political leaders also kind of want us to not be able to tell what's right or what's wrong, because that way they can get away with it. Now, this is what I've been telling folks, which is, if you can't just say that we don't need a system of right and wrong. We can just kind of go wherever we want, just let free will kind of rule our entire society. Well, the problem is, free will that exists in both good people and bad people. And when you conflate them, when you don't have a society where you strictly say murder is wrong, or stealing is bad, or it's illegal to break into the Capitol, things like that. These are the lines that we have to draw, and as a society, we have to enforce them, because that is the way we're going to be able to handle the structure of our system, and so that we can have those avenues of peaceful transitions in power or peaceful changes in progress in our society. Give us an impression of your overall relationship with parents and how that kind of contributes to the overall learning environment you try to provide so that kids can be able to succeed in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I've had pretty positive interactions with parents over my 15-year career. I mean, there's a few parents that would say, why aren't you teaching enough, Black history, for example? And then I would just make a long list of all the things we do in every unit that has to do with, studying Black Americans and stuff. So they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I wrote a Simpsons sociology class one time, and a parent was just like, oh, so now they're teaching the Simpsons in school. And I was like, well, let me break down to you what sociology is and show you the textbooks and how it aligns. And they're like, oh, okay. So I think it's the same thing I do on my social media is, I say things that people don't like, but I'm batting damn near 1,000 on the people that want to sit down with me and explain to me why they don't like it. And then I have a conversation. It just happened 5 minutes ago with my family friend, as I said. Like, I'm not like a frivolous person. Like, I'm doing this, especially when it comes to my job. I'm very calculated about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. I thought about it a lot, so I kind of have my ducks in a row. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to be right all the time. I'll definitely be wrong, but I can at least bring you into where my thinking is, and it's rooted in good pedagogy. And I always try to look at the other side on counter. If I think it's a good idea, I'm always seeking disconfirmation. So I'm my harshest critic. So I think that by the time the parents get to me, I got my stuff kind of down. And then if they want to protest about something, I'm pretty good at explaining myself. So I've actually been lucky at that. I think what happens is a lot of teachers might be like right now might be teaching this social justice in quotes stuff, and they don't know it really well. It's just it's packaged really nicely and they put it out there. And then when a parent gives a little bit of pushback, the teachers aren't even sure how to defend it. And I think that's I kind of go against some of the social justice stuff, and I get harsh criticism. But they don't want to interact with me because I have my ducks in a row about how to really bring about social justice, about what laws, what bills I would support that would bring about social justice, as opposed to just maybe putting a black box on my Instagram or something like that. And then they don't want to really interact with that. So I think it just comes down to being well prepared, doing your homework. I'm obsessed with what I do. Like it really is an obsession. I love it. I love it more than anything. People say, if you weren't teaching, what would you be doing? It's like, no, I'd be teaching, bro. Like there's nothing else I can do. I'd find a way to teach something. So because of that, I'm kind of immune from a lot of the pitfalls that other teachers have fallen into, I think.
Well, it definitely sounds like you're doing quite a bit of important homework. Even teachers do homework, something that only took me several years to realize. I say several years, basically almost my entire life. But I always remember those kind of collective myths about teachers. I think one of the funniest ones I remember was when kids used to think that teachers assign homework, and then we're all doing homework, and the teachers are kind of just laughing in the background. I was like, ha ha ha, they're gonna correct our papers, and it basically splashed a huge amount of red ink, sometimes even crimson ink, which kind of scared me a little bit. But it was. In any way, it was a good exercise when I was a kid to just get used to a lot of this process of getting to realize your mistakes and not being afraid of making those corrections and speaking to the teachers about them. Asking follow-up questions about the things I learned, so that it's not just a simple here's your grade. It's kind of stamped on your report card and that's it. There's always something more to it. So I hope that experience is far wider than just mine, but I just want to kind of throw that out a little bit.
Yeah, but if I could chime in on the red pen thing, actually, I think that we need to teach grammar and stuff like that. I sat in on when my wife was hiring people for like front desk at her salon, and the kids they were in their 20s, they couldn't formulate an email. They didn't know grammar and spelling. It's a real problem. But it can go too far, where you worked really hard, you poured your heart out into some writing, and then it's all marked with red pen telling you that it's terrible. Like that's doing damage too. So teachers, it's a complicated dance you have to make between helping give the students the skills and structure that they need, but not crushing that creative, innovative spirit that young people have inside of them. And, school always exchanges this creativity for compliance. And I don't want that either. I don't want someone with amazing grammar and has nothing to say. So you have to find that balance. And I think the red pen, as good as it's been, I think it's been really damaging as well to a lot of people.
You make a good point. I got to agree with you on that. Grammar is really essential, and does kind of bother me a little bit when I miss a comma or two here and there, and sometimes I think the red ink just kind of makes it look like I committed a crime against humanity or something. But anyway, I want to now move on to something a little bit different now, which is about discourse in our schools. We're seeing a number of very troubling signs of discourse being suppressed because people don't agree with it, or people are being offended by it for some reason. We've seen a lot of coverage about this in higher education, but I want to get your thoughts about what you think is happening in the middle and the high school levels, especially when it comes to this idea that we need to protect, quote unquote, protect our students from bad speech or hate speech, as they call it.
All right, I have a lot of thoughts on this. So, all right, so let me just go on a quick rant. So, the First Amendment applies to government action, but at what government and big tech, social media, they're in bed together. I just saw Facebook donated $20 million, I think, last year in lobbying. So they're kind of one and the same, but they can get away with censorship because they say they're a private business. So you can always say, refuse service type of thing. But what's happening, part of the reason why it's conservative is like Twitter, one of the big hot button issues, and I will get into education, but let me just go down this road a little bit because I think this is important. The transgender issue. Now, I've had 4 different transgender people on my podcast. I've had trans students. It's a complicated issue, okay? And what Twitter and social media companies did is there's 2 different ways you can misgender someone, okay? There is a biological misgendering, and then there's an ideological misgendering. So if you take Caitlyn Jenner and you say Caitlyn Jenner is a woman, that is biologically misgendering her. Okay, biologically misgendering, saying that, as far as like chromosomes and things like that. Okay, it's a fact that her sex is female. Okay, you can misgender her also in an ideological way and say that she's a man, and that is ideologically misgendering her when that's offensive to her and things like that. So Twitter had to make a decision. Which one do we go with? And they went with the ideological. So now the conservatives that are, by nature, conservative is like, there are these long held ideas that we fought for, and like order, the idea of order. We need boxes. We need to categorize things, and saying that when you can be deplatformed for stating a scientific fact, that is a dangerous concept. And I get that argument. The biggest censorship that really bothered me was Unity 2020 was this push to try and get a different presidential candidate other than Joe and Donald, and they got banned off of Twitter and Facebook and other platforms for saying #no to Trump and Joe or something like that, like promoting a third party option. They got banned for that, and that's very strange, and they didn't get an explanation or anything. Gina Carano getting banned for comparing political viewpoints to Nazism, but then just recently on Bill Maher, a former senator, Heidi Heitkamp, I think is her name, she said, Gina Carano's a Nazi. And she will just say this over and over again. And if you deplatform Gina Carano, she can't defend herself. So then, and I'm not saying she was deplatformed necessarily, but like if you would, and then you just say that enough, and it's like, well, what did she actually say? So censorship's a real problem. Okay, so those are like my examples of how it's a real problem. Going to the school, how this happens is, again, the teachers don't like pushback. They don't like pushback. They like compliance. What makes a good student? When you think of like a good student in high school, it's someone who does what they're told. Remember this stuff, write it on the test. This person remembered the stuff and wrote it on the test. They come in on time. They leave when the bell rings. They don't pack their stuff before the bell rings because I told them not to. And that's a good student. And anyone that pushes back against that is smacked. It's like, hey, stay in line. And I think that we're going to fall into categories then of people who say like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I will stay in line. And then other people that are just like, F that. No, I'm not going to stay in line. I'm not going to do this. And those are the people that are pushing back. And they might be pushing back on the left, and they might be pushing back on the right. But that is where this is coming from. And it's again, instead of a teacher, it's Jack and Sundar at Google and Mark saying, hey, no, you got to comply with our rules. Stop making this so complicated. Like when Tim Pool brought up this transgender issue, Jack Dorsey was like, I don't know. It's like, stop making it complicated. The same way that a teacher would be when you're like, well, hold on, Mrs. or Mr. Teacher, but didn't this happen? And doesn't that go against what you're saying? And it's like, don't threaten my authority. Let me teach my class. I think I'm watching these patterns come up over and over again. So I think that's how it relates to the education system. But I haven't really thought about that, how it applies to my own career area. But I think that's what it is.
I'd say parents and teachers and even a lot of kids with them would agree that this model of being an ideal student, of following every single rule, that doesn't make you stand out as an individual, does it? And it certainly doesn't promote this whole idea that there's people who are, for whatever reason, are going to disagree with you, are going to have a slightly different point of view, maybe an add-on point of view to what you're saying, because that really is the real world. You know, you don't know when you first meet someone on the street, you don't know where that person is coming from. You need to be able to not only harbor the characteristics of being open-minded in the sense of just being able to allow people to express their points of view, but also to be able to have arenas where you can have this conversation. I think that's why I have my podcast, you have your podcast. There's a number of people out there who are promoting arenas of discourse, because that's feels like it's being lost. It feels like now it's all about a discipline camp, a boot camp, if you like, under the thumb of teacher X. And I'm not saying every teacher's like that. I'm just saying that overall, it seems the environment is kind of closing in. You know, it feels like you turn almost anywhere else. You feel like school, you think, would be the place where you can have all those active conversations and be able to express all kinds of different points of view and be able to be challenged on those views. But it doesn't seem like that's what the reality is happening right now on the ground.
You know, there's people are like allergic to nuance. You know, like I think all of those guys, you know, Mark and Jack, when they started, they're like, yeah, it'll just be a way to connect with people. Just, you know, don't be an a-hole. But that's it. You don't understand morals. I was just in a faculty meeting and I heard some people at my school saying, you know, we have an obligation to teach these kids morals. I was like, hold on, because this is an area that like I work with Jonathan Haidt and like, you know, I understand moral foundations theory. I mean, I'm like, hold on. What morals are we talking about? Are we talking about from a religious standpoint? Are we talking about from a social science standpoint? Are we talking about from an ideological standpoint? Is eating meat moral? Like, this is complicated stuff. And the only way you're going to understand what is more, I mean, this goes back to the big dawn of man. And if we need to figure out, I'm not a moral relativist, I'm saying that this is complex and we need to talk about what morality we're going to be basing this on. But that only happens through the discourse, through podcasting and long form podcasting and having discussions. I mean, the debate rules it's absurd. It is absurd the way that like presidential debates are done. I mean, just soundbite, put out the soundbite. It's intentionally vague. You go to college campuses, people aren't really challenging these thoughts. They're still stuck in this echo chamber bubble, and and when they get met with another outside opinion, it's like that's like a threat. It's like a threat to them, you know, psychological backfire effect, and then they want to fight it as opposed to just being open-minded. I mean, that's what college is supposed to be, right, Sherman? Like, it's supposed to be this place where you just question everything, you know, sit in a dorm room smoking a joint, like, what is the universe? What is right? What is wrong? Like, that's supposed to be college, but now it's not. And like the difference between an activist and activism and education means you don't know the answer and you're trying to find it. Activism is, I know the answer and I'm trying to implement it. And there's a lot more activism than there is education on college campuses. There's a lot more activism than there is education in a lot of different professions. And that's a problem. It's even found its way into the medical industry. When they said that racism was a bigger disease than COVID, I remember I heard John McWhorter just be like, I'm out. Now I'm out from this. Because these are doctors saying this. They're ideologically possessed. And it's a real dangerous thing when you can't even see the world clearly. Then you definitely can't come up with the right moral kind of avenues to go down. It's concerning.
God help us if every aspect of society is just politicized. I don't want to see that world. I don't think anyone truly does. But people do it intentionally, unintentionally, and we need to get the word out. God help us if we can't be able to express different points of view, even if it's the minority. Oftentimes, we forget that maybe the minority can be the majority at some point in time. Not on every issue, but on certain issues, it has changed. The time paradigm has changed for particular perspectives. Let's keep that in mind before we immerse ourselves in bubbles of in college campuses and other places where we're not challenged on our views. We need to be informed. We need to have those difficult conversations, but those conversations can reap a lot of benefits. Just like how Rome wasn't built in a day, solutions are not built in a day. Sometimes you're going to have many, many conversations, but to be able to be in that habit, I think is one of the things that I wanted to get people to understand and be able to apply in their lives as much as possible. Will, you're one of the pioneers of education that we really need right now. I can't express that enough. And you brought up something earlier, which is about intellectual humility. Tell us what it is and why it's significant for you and for how we can proceed forward in making our education system better than it was before.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the compliment too. Like I said, I'm the first step, and then it's like, I put this out there. Those who can't do, teach. I'm not doing it. I put it on you guys and you guys go off and do it. I came up with these 3 pillars about how to have good conversations and how to move forward during this time. And I just kind of came up with these on my own from a whole bunch of things. And it's intellectual humility, genuine curiosity, and grace. And I think if you apply those things, then we'll get pretty far. And intellectual humility is, you might be wrong. And that's really, that's at the end of it, you might be wrong. I was listening to Jordan Peterson was at Oxford doing a talk, and he's been hypercritical of the Canadian government and Justin Trudeau. And he got asked, if you could ask Justin Trudeau one question, what would it be? And he kind of like laughed. He's like, oh, and then he was like, his question was essentially, is there any possibility that what you're doing could be damaging? And what that brought up for me is like, that's what it is so many people are certain that they're right. They're certain of it, and they're not. There's so many instances. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times, or even if they are right, they don't know it all. Like you said, like there's so much nuance that they're missing. So you might have great talking points. I think conservatives, Charlie Kirk and people like that have great talking points, but they're missing stuff. They're missing something about that. They have a statistic, but what they're not looking at is the why. You might have a statistic, 70% of Black children are born in single parent households. Yeah, but why? Is it because that, they're locked up for nonviolent marijuana crimes? Is that possible? That they're being locked in cages? Like, and what to what degree? There's so many elements that are here that are in play. And they're just, so people either have their talking points and they're sticking to that, or they have their strong views and they're sticking to that. And they're not even thinking about where they could be wrong. They're not even thinking about what they could be missing. Because why would you do that? Again, it attacks your ego. But what I really am trying to advocate for to teachers and to anyone who's trying to, fight in this, fight us through this for this country. I love this country. Let's get through this. Is this the idea that you want to be proven wrong. What am I missing here is so important. And if we just do that more and just open up our minds to that more, I think we'll get further.
Absolutely. The pillars you outlined are so critical to just building a habit as well. As you were pointing out a little bit earlier about getting used to challenging people, but not for the sake of revenge or for a soundbite, but to do so because you want to have those active conversations. You want to have those debates, and you want to also have accountability too, which I'm so happy to hear. And I hope that we can build that more as a bit more of a habit across our education system, and that way our kids can be ready to engage in the challenging interactions, but hopefully be able to gain the learning benefit out of having those particular habits. Now, as we come to a close for our episode. As you know, Will, for Friends and Fellow Citizens, we have the 6 pillars of Washington's principles that he outlined in his farewell address. So if you were to take maybe 2 or 3 of these principles and apply them to our discussion and your career and your philosophy, which ones would you pick and why you chose those particular values?
Those are all awesome, and they're so American. But I think patriotism, I think, is really important. To understand the idea of what America is. America is an idea. America is inclusive. I love Frederick Douglass. He recognized that when the Constitution was written, he wasn't included, but he said these words will include me. Essentially, and I think that that's the way out of this is the American way. That's the way out of all of this craziness and all this stuff, and then gets to unity. Is that's how we unify is also crucial to this. We're the United States, but we need each other. The Republicans need the Democrats. The progressives need the conservatives. If it's just conservatives running the show, we will fail. If it's just progressives, we will fail. So we need each other, and stop looking at these people like they're your enemy and start looking at them as someone to teach you something, and also someone that is going to be there to buttress your ideas. So you're going to try and move forward with your ideas because you know them to be right, but then they're going to know them to be right. And the clash is a beautiful clash if it's done properly. And our founding fathers did not like each other. They did not agree, but they knew that they needed each other to win. So to move this country forward. So, Madison and Hamilton disagreed, but they worked together. Madison and Jefferson disagreed. And that's where George Washington was so cool, because he was the unifier. I mean, he was unanimously picked, in the Electoral College. And when he left, what did he say? Be careful of the factions. Watch out for the political parties to divide us. And he was right. And I don't know how we get that back, but I think it's social science, and I think it's long form podcasting, and because of big tech, because of the tech companies that I can't stand, but including in that is Zencaster. And you and I can have a conversation. We can put this out there, and there seems to be a market for it. People are recognizing this more and more and more, the need to unify as a way to save this wonderful country, because it is a wonderful country, and it's a wonderful country. Anyone that says that it's not, or it's never been, or is founded on genocide and oppression, well, every country was founded on genocide and oppression. So, which one is getting us out of it? That's the idea. Everyone has a checkered past. Our country is no different. So how do we move forward with that? That needs to be the focus. People go through unbelievable hardship just to land on our shores. Still happening. So there's something valuable here, and I think it's worth fighting for. And the way you fight is by unifying, oddly enough.
That's an excellent answer. Really amazing. I'm so glad you brought up this idea that America really has an exceptional side to it. In fact, many exceptional sides to it. We need to keep that. I believe if we believe America is exceptional, we must keep it that way. Will, you've brought so much insight into this episode. Tell us more about Cylinder Radio and how people can learn more about what you do and keep track of what you're doing in your particular field.
Yeah, thanks. So I was doing this kind of stuff for a long time, and then my wife was like, "Put it on social media. Put it on social media. Put it on social media." And I was like, "People don't care," but people do, and so I started a social media. I started an Instagram coming up on almost 3 years ago. And then I started my podcast about a little over 2 years ago. And it's all about just civil discourse. I was tired of not all the stuff that we're talking about, Sherman, like let's talk it out, is I have a platform, and I would just reach out to people that I disagreed with, or people that had a unique perspective on the world. And I would bring them on and just have a discussion. And that's what it was all about. It's Cylinder Radio because it's like different angles. From one angle, it's a rectangle, the other angle it's a circle, but it's actually complicated. So I've had on, just like take transgender issue as, because I talked about that earlier. Like 4 different transgender people. One of them was a hardcore Trump supporter that went to the Capitol on the 6th, transgender. Okay, one of them is an activist, trans female. The other one is an activist trans male. The other one is kind of a center libertarian who has traditionally voted Republican. Like there, so people go, wait a second, what? There's a 13-year-old black kid who's a Trump supporter. There was a Scientologist vegan Trump support. Like I did do a lot of Trump supporters partially because I thought Trump supporters were just this monolith. You know, I've had on a bunch of black conservatives because again, you know, black people are held up as some sort of monoliths. You know, I've had on abortion doctor and then pro-life feminist. Like all these things that people just go like, man, I don't know what to think. It's like, yes, we're individuals. We're unique and we're all equal because of the 14th Amendment and we're all equal under the law and just under this flag. And that's what's so beautiful about it is the uniqueness and the individuality of this country. So on social media, Instagram is what I use. It's probably my biggest platform where I put my ideas out there. It's just my name, Will Reusch. And that's fun to grow because it does get me into certain conversations and stuff like that. And I get to, you know, work out my thoughts on current events in real time with the help of a whole network of people that now I've built up that are also very, very politically diverse. So I got the conservatives saying, hey, you're missing this one. And I had the liberals saying, hey, you're missing this one. And it's so good because I'm developing good ideas. I mean, it's like an education for me just using social media. It's been really great. So I welcome anyone that thinks that listening to this and said, I am off. Like, let's have a conversation. I'll do an Instagram live with you. I will have an Instagram live with anyone that thinks that I have really bad, dangerous ideas because then maybe I'll learn something from it.
Great stuff. Well, I will make sure to link your social media and website in the show notes below. Will, I want to thank you so much for coming on to this episode. You brought so much insight into about 56 minutes or so of speaking with us. You've been such a pioneer for education. We really need people like you. We need that kind of mentality to be able to get people to grow the discourse world because it feels like it's shrinking. So I just want to express my appreciation towards you, and I want to thank you so much for coming on to Friends of Fellow Citizens today.
Well, thank you for bringing me on, and I'm very worried about our future in Washington D.C. So if you have if you're going for a career in politics, I'll help out any way I can, Sherman. I think that if we have more leadership like you, then I think we'd be in a lot better place. So yeah, I'm going to support you any way I can.
Well, I'm very grateful for your support, Will. You've been such a wonderful guest today on our episode, and really, really appreciate your time spending with us here in the Friends of Fellow Citizens community. And that'll wrap up our episode today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We had a wonderful conversation. Make sure, once again, you subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family if you haven't already. Again, I really appreciate all of your support every single day. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time at the next episode of Friends and Fellow Citizens. Take care, and so long.